Okay, welcome back everybody. So glad to see all of you here and some familiar names from yesterday as well. So thank you so much. I've gone through your stories. Some of you sent it quite late, so I didn't really have time to go through them, line by line. But you know what we'll do? We will read through the stories right now in this class. Is that okay? So I think I've received stories from room 1 and room 3. And one more room, I think. Ankit Kumar, Anushri, and Sneha have sent me. So you can perhaps read it out in class.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So I just want a clarification. Are Ankit and Anushri in the same group?
No, ma'am. No.
So Ankit, what is your group's number? Your room number, that is.
Room number 1, ma'am.
But isn't Anushri's room 1?
Yes, ma'am. Myself, Karthik, and Aditya are in room 1.
Let me just check, Ankit, because the room numbers are getting mixed up. Just give me 1 minute. I'm gonna check. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have the order of breakout room.
Ma'am, according to the plot given, you can confirm which is room number 1 and which is number others.
Correct. So, Ankit Kumar, you have sent the story of Rahul, right? And that is, so you're from room 2, correct? Yes, you're from room 2. I think Ankit Kumar is from room 2. So we have room 1, Anushri, room 2, Ankit Kumar, and room 3, Sneha Dasan group. Okay. So what we'll do right now is storytelling is also about the narration of the story, not just the writing. So I'll invite each of you from, different groups to perhaps switch on your videos if possible and narrate the story in an engaging manner for everyone to listen. Okay. So let me call Anushri and group. If anyone from your group is Anushri, Karthik, and Aditya, if any one of you would like to narrate the story, you can go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I can't really switch on my video right now because I'm not prepared to
That's
do it.
okay, not compulsory at all. I just
suggest. Yeah. Okay. So today I'll narrate the story that my group wrote, and the name of the title of the story is Scammed. The sun was peeking through the gaps in the curtain. The sound of gentle breeze and chirping of birds could be heard from the small apartment room. It was a warm, pleasant summer morning, but Mohan's mind was anything but pleasant. He could sense a dark cloud looming over him as he lay on his bed thinking about his next course of action. He was duped by a broker. That's what you get for blindly trusting a stranger with your savings. On a day like this, Mohan would usually get up feeling optimistic. He would go into the bustling streets of Delhi in search of a job. So, like any other 22-year-old, Mohan was unsure about what he wanted to do with his life. So, after his graduation from the district college in a small village located in the suburbs, he came to Delhi in hopes of finding his passion. However, Mohan soon realized the brutality of the cutthroat society he lived in. He attended multiple interviews, but none worked out in his favor. So when a kind man from a legitimate job consultancy approached him and offered to help, he was too excited to think critically. He only realized that he was scammed when the man disappeared with his money and stopped responding to his calls and messages. It was not a small sum of money that could easily be brushed off. It was a good portion of what his parents had saved up for him. And now all was lost. Maybe I should go back home, Mohan thought to himself. With no money, no luck in finding a job, and after being scammed, there was no point in him trying anymore. But even the thought of facing his parents like this made him feel sick. Maybe he was never meant for greatness. Maybe his future was set to become a tragedy. Maybe, no, I won't give up. I can't give up this easily with one setback. Mohan took a deep breath and sat upon his bed with the last bit of conviction left in him. Even if he seemed destined to go down, he wanted to put up a fight. With a little help, of course. Mohan's aunt was a police officer. Although he wanted to resolve this issue by himself, he realized that it's better to ask for some help when needed. He picked up his phone and contacted her. There was good and bad news. The good news was that his aunt was very understanding and sympathetic to his situation and assured him that she would help him in every way she can. The bad news was that apparently this was not the first scam reported in the past week. It seemed to have been a group that has duped multiple young people, and so far there has been no luck in catching them. Nevertheless, he was asked to come by the station and give an official report. Not knowing if to feel relieved or anxious, Mohan restlessly waited at the bus stop. He watched the various people eagerly going about their day and felt even more out of place. But something else also seemed out of place, a familiar face that has been haunting him since that day. It was the man that duped him, casually walking without a care in the world. Mohan felt his blood rushing through his veins and dashed towards the man. He could not afford to let him get away. The man took to his heels when he saw Mohan. Luckily for Mohan, though, he tripped on the pavement and fell on his face. Mohan grabbed the man by his collar and restrained him. His muscles tensed, and he really wanted to throw in a couple of punches, but he managed to compose himself. He did not want to waste any more of his energy on that lowly scammer. The police arrived, and the man was arrested. His aunt complimented him for his quick thinking and action and promised to get to the root of the issue. She felt positive that Mohan would get his money back. With the adrenaline all worn off, Mohan was hit with a sense of relief. He was no longer on the path to be a failure. He could get his life together. He took a deep breath and swore that he would never blindly trust strangers anymore, at least not with his money. Thank you.
Great, great. Others, what do you think of the story?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Right? Relatable? Some parts of it, did you relate to the character in some manner? No?
Yes, ma'am, it was relatable.
All right, so I just wanted to share the screen. I'll just share the story with you and just point out one or two important things that I thought was worth sharing. So, yeah. So can any of you tell me in what person this is written? You know the different kinds of persons in which stories are written, right? Can anybody maybe brainstorm and tell me?
Third person, ma'am. It's written in third person.
Right? So generally, okay, this is written in third person, absolutely. So what are the kinds of ways in which you can write stories? Different persons. In what person is an autobiography written?
And first person.
First person. So Anushri, could you tell us what a first person?
First person is when it's written from the perspective of about the author itself. Like we use I and in the present tense. So it's a narration of the same person. It's a narration of the story that happened to the person who's writing it.
Right? It is the narration of the story that happened from the point of view of the person who is writing it. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
And we use the personal pronoun I or we generally when it is a first person narrative. Right? It is not necessarily always written in present tense. That is a different story. That is not is inaccurate. But for sure, you use the first person, and generally the dialogues and the and even the background narration is also done in the first person. Now, this story is written in the third person narrative, right? You can see where briefly the point of view moves from being third person to first person. Can any of you point out which part of the story does that? Is everybody reading the story?
Third person to first person, ma'am.
At some point in the story, there is a shift in the point of view. Suddenly,
the
you
third-
Yeah,
Para.
on the third para, man. Third para.
third para, where exactly?
When he is narrating by himself, maybe I should go back home. Mohan thought to himself.
Maybe he was never meant for greatness. Maybe his future was set to become a tragedy. Maybe, and suddenly it shifts to the first person. No, I won't give up. I can't give up this easily with one setback. Right? So, what is happening here is a very interesting literary device, right? It's a literary device, not literary device, literary technique, more like, which we call free indirect discourse. Free indirect discourse is where most of your story is written in the third person format. So much of the story is written from the point of view of, the narrator who is looking at the story as if he or she knows everything about the story. However, at some points in the story, when the shift in the perspective to the protagonist of the story, in the sense that it feels as if the protagonists themselves are narrating the story, then you have the usage of a literary technique which we call free indirect discourse. So I thought that was very interesting that I could see in the story. Great. Now let's look at another point in the same story regarding tense. In which tense is this written?
Past tense.
Yes, it is written in past tense. Absolutely. What effect does that have? What effect does writing the story in past tense have?
Effect means, ma'am.
Okay, I'm not asking you for an answer directly. So room one, Anushri and Aditya and Karthik, maybe you can take some more time later on when you go back and try to convert this entire story into the present tense.
Yeah, ma'am. Sure.
Right?
Yes,
Just
ma'am.
try and look at what different effect that will have. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's a good experiment to do, right? And you'll realize how that feels different and this feels different.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of you can maybe try writing this entire thing as if you are Mohan.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So just keep shifting around the points of view and the tenses, and you'll have the entire story will have a completely different aura.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Okay, so that's all I wanted to share regarding the story. Well done, group one, I think. Room one.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Great. So let's move on to room two. Room two would be Ankit Kumar and co. Do you want to start?
Ma'am, actually, we have written two stories based on the plot. So after
Sure.
me,
Sure. One of you read one of those stories and the other person can read the other story.
So this story is about a 26-year-old person whose life changed after his sour dream. So, are you asleep? It's time to take your medicine, his mother said softly. Rahul is the son of a very rich investor and born with a silver spoon. He has found an easy way into everything he wanted, as he was an only child. But because of the market crash of 2000 and moved into a small home, the whole family was in trouble. His father had cancer, and because they found it difficult to even pay the medical bills, Rahul was unemployed at the time and couldn't support his family even after being 26 years old. He was heavily depressed, and that's why he was taking medicines. One afternoon, he was feeling sleepy, wondering over how easy his life had been. Had he taken life seriously, he would have been able to take his family out of the situation. And he began to think of other ways in which his life would have been different. He thought, if my life had been challenging like other successful people and the people who are in village who take challenges more frequently, I would have been more able to solve this issue. After that, he fell asleep and found himself in a dream where he was the son of a poor farmer in a village and their parents were also in bad health. He was brilliant and ambitious, but was not sure how his further study was going to happen because of the financial problems. He had to do masters from JNU, from where he did his graduation. But their parents needed him back at the village for continuous medical treatment. He couldn't move his family to Delhi because of lack of money. So he seeks help from his professor who had known him from a very long time, and he performed well into his class. And he was also a very generous person. The professor called his friend who has a place to rent. He agreed to keep their family, in return of which Rahul would tutor his little son. Rahul was able to complete post-graduation and later got a job. And finally, he was able to support his family. After this incident, Rahul came out of his dream and thought how he was conditioned to think from the childhood. Whenever he needed any help, he could ask money from his father. How he didn't value building social skills and connections, and he learned from his dream how he can leverage his little skills to earn something and improve his skills along the way. He was not as academically brilliant as his dream self, but he was a good football player. So he made a little football club and started teaching high school kids how to play well in the nearby ground as a means to curb his depression. Slowly, he became skilled at coaching them. He was finally hired by the school in which those students studied as a football coach. Along with coaching, he continued to improve his skills in football, and finally he ended up being captain of the West Bengal team, his native state. In this way, uh, he earned prize after that. His team won the 2016-2017 Santosh Trophy, and in this way, he earned a lot of prize money. And with the help of his father, and after that, he didn't stop, and it was just a start. And after that, he participated in a lot of tournaments and got a lot of fame and money. So after this, he also started investing money in the stock market because that was growing at a huge rate. Also taking advice from his father and made great profit. And finally, he was able to achieve what he dreamed. So the key was reflecting on his life and learning from the experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was Ankit who narrated, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. What do the others think? How did you find the story? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it was like it was good.
Mhm. So the plot point here that the team has added is the dream. It's the dream that changes things in the story, right? The dream is the turning point, right? Okay. So I will share the screen once again, then all of you can see the story, and I'll point out a few things. Is it visible? Is the story visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Great. So, okay, once again, what person is this? Has this been written in?
Third person.
Third person, what tense?
Past tense only, ma'am.
Past tense only, right? So here I want to make an observation regarding how all the three, 2 out of 3 stories have a male protagonist written in third person narrative form, and there's a sort of self-discovery kind of thing happening, correct? right? Both of
Yes,
these
ma'am.
stories, what is the, okay, let me put the question this way. What are the commonalities between both these stories in terms of plot points, in terms of elements?
Both were written in third person perspective and also
Third
in past
person
tense.
perspective, yes.
And also on past tense.
Yes, past tense, yes. What else? Regarding the content of the story itself.
This is more like, same like we've written that person, he finishes his education, the search for job, something like that. Common elements.
Common elements is that both are young. The protagonists in both stories are young men who have some problem in their lives and who are on the way to self-discovery. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, in 20s, like both of the protagonists in his 20s, and they are facing some problem regarding the
20s.
professional.
The thing is,
No.
Rahul was able to find a job, whereas Mohan couldn't find a job. That's it.
Mohan
Yes.
couldn't find a job, and the narrative stopped. I mean, it's not like a stop. This first story was more of a micro story. There is a larger story going on, right, which is Mohan's quest for a job. But one of the incidents that happens as part of his quest for a job also teaches him a small lesson, which is not to trust strangers, which is what the story is about. Whereas the second story, which is also about a young graduate who is, trying to make his way in life, is more of a macro kind of story which covers everything, which starts from the beginning and ends with Rahul getting whatever he wanted. Right? Okay. So both are young graduates, young young men looking to find themselves. Correct? Am I correct? Looking to find themselves.
Yes,
Yes,
looking
ma'am.
for the right
Yes, ma'am.
things in their life.
Right? Now, there is a very specific set of stories. Now, this is again a very common sort of story genre, which is called the Bildungsroman. You can see the chat. It's called the Bildungsroman, which is essentially about somebody growing, a person, young person, who is not yet out there in the world, growing into themselves and learning something. And, there's this transition from, a teenager kind of mentality to an adult kind of mentality, right? So there's this transition from young adulthood to proper adulthood. And that is what, or from teenage to adulthood, from teenage to young adulthood. And there is a specific genre of novels, narrative stories, short stories, whatever be it, which we call the Bildungsroman, which is the coming of age novels, right? Coming of age. What does coming of age mean to you?
The transition from stories about the transition from adolescent to adult, or from a teenager to the next stage of
To the
life.
next stage of life, right?
Yeah.
Coming of age. When do you come of age normally in the legal sense?
18 when you're
When you're 18, right? When do you graduate? You graduate in your early 20s. And then again, there is a whole transition period that happens in that time. Correct? So it is a very, very common genre of writing, which has, this young male protagonist, and that protagonist is not yet well versed with the ways of the world. But once he goes out into the world, he learns of one or two things about how the world works, and then comes of age, learns his lesson. Right? So it's both of you, coincidentally or not, have somewhat sort of written a small piece of a Bildungsroman. Right? So yeah, that's one thing I wanted to tell you. Secondly, so look at this this sentence, these two sentences. Ankit and others in the group. I say these are out of place. There's something a little bit off. What's off?
There should be some more details about it.
No, in terms of the technique. I'm not talking about the content. I have highlighted 2 sentences. You can see the highlights, right? Not highlight, I'm sorry.
The
I've
tense
selected.
is, the tense changes.
Ma'am,
Yes,
I think the tense changed.
the tense has changed, which it should not, correct? Because the entire story is in past tense. Suddenly, if it moves to the present tense, there is a break in the narrative. Right? There is a break in the time in which you visualize the story happening. So when you're writing a story, be very careful as to stick to the same tense from the top to the bottom, right? From beginning to end. So how would you correct this sentence?
He seeked help from his professor, who was a very
He
generous man.
sought help from his
Sought,
professor,
okay.
who was a very generous man. The professor called his friend who had a place to rent. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So can we go on to the next story, the next version of the same story?
Yes, ma'am. May I narrate it?
Yes, Ali. Please go ahead.
Rahul, tall, brilliant boy. He had 5 siblings, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Rahul was the youngest of all. His mother died when he was 7. She used to say, Rahul, you will have a bright future. He completed his graduation from JNU in humanities. Not only was he academically brilliant, but also had been a student leader and set up many clubs in JNU. His father was a farmer and always wanted his children to help him in the fields. Rahul's father was against the idea of continuing Rahul's education after intermediate, but his siblings, considering the brilliancy of Rahul, insisted his father for his studies. Rahul's family income was very little. His father had trouble paying his expenditure in Delhi, which mainly included his fooding and lodging. So after graduation, his father did not want him to continue studies. Rahul was very adamant for higher education, and so was his father against it. So the next year, he was not able to enroll in any college, but this did not stop him from gaining knowledge. He used to borrow newspaper from his neighbor and read them. He soon realized that it would not help and asked his father that he would not ask any money from him for his higher studies. He just wanted to study. His father, not knowing his intention, again broke his heart. So he got to his sibling and asked him for their help. His eldest brother Atul, who was married, told him the solution. Atul then went to his father and said that he had got some fine work in the fields of the next village's sarpanch and he wanted a helping hand. So his father asked Rahul to go with him. Rahul's face lit up and he happily went with his brother, knowing that from Atul's house he will go to Delhi. Once he reached Delhi, he contacted his graduation friends and asked them for financial help. One of his friends offered him a shelter place and one offered him a job in a bookstore. He settled, once settled, he started studying, not in college but in a coaching center for UPSC. Or better to say, he had always studied for UPSC since his first year in JNU, but he had never told his family about it as he was knowing that his father would have surely given him a good taunting as don't waste your time. Abhinav, your cousin, has prepared it for 7 years and was not able to crack it, and much more. So after 3 years of hard work, he cracked it and got AIR 73. He was in seventh heaven and was not sure how he would tell this to his parents. So he went to his village with a convoy of police cars. His father and all his siblings were terrified when they saw so many police cars and even terrified when they saw Rahul with them. They thought he had committed some serious crime but was shell shocked when they were told the reality. His father's eyes swelled up and he could not hide his tears. While he realized how wrong he was and how important education is, Rahul hugged him and his siblings and said, Father, mother was right. His father agreed while weeping.
Great. Thank you so much. So, what do others think?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. What caught your interest? What about it is attractive?
In a sort, like
His passion towards getting educated or something like that.
Right?
Rahul's
and
his hard work.
Mhm.
in a
Relatable UPSC preparation story.
Yes.
That's what Ronak says.
and in less word, it's he's put more like very accurate things in the story.
Mhm, mhm. So the turning point here is what in this story?
When he got cleared his UPSC.
Mhm. I couldn't hear that. Could you say that again?
I was saying that when he cleared his UPSC, so I think that was
When he
his.
cleared the UPSC, but what is the conflict? That is the climax, right? He clears the UPSC, and that's the climax. What is the conflict?
That his father could not afford his education.
Right? The financial troubles.
Yeah.
And Rahul's stubbornness to continue higher education despite the financial struggle. Right? So that is the conflict. That is the center.
Yes,
Great work. To Ali and team, great work. I would suggest working on the writing and the using of quotes and commas. So all of that, those little technical things are important because they contribute to the experience of reading the story and narrating the story as well. And to Ali in particular, you can read out the story with a little bit more in a manner that doesn't show that you're reading from a paper, right? A little bit more spontaneity and a little bit more expression would be great.
Okay, ma'am.
But great story, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's move on to the next story then. Who's next? Sneha and group. Sneha? Is Sneha around?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Sneha, you had sent me the story on Shera, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So why don't you narrate it for us?
Okay. My story is about a dog. So it went like Shera was a young brown fur dog. Though he looked average, but he was a quick learner and very helpful. He was adopted at a very young age by Ninu. One chilling winter morning, Shaira accompanied Ninu to a nearby forest to collect some woods. The forest was quite dark, covered with thick fog, trees hugging each other, and birds were chirping in harmony. Nature was resonating with positivity. Ninu was trying to find some dry woods. Suddenly, she realized Shera was not around. Shera, where are you? She called. Shera was lost in the deep forest. The poor dog panicked in the deceptive weather, frightened by the unknown. He tried finding Nina the whole day, but in vain. No vain. Um, the the sounds of the forest started getting wilder and frightening. Shira ran for the real life here and there, searching for Nino. In the process, he got bruised at many places and became exhausted. It cried loudly for a long time, hoping his owner would find it, listening to his voice. To his dismay, she left him alone in the forest. A group of wild dogs came across it and started barking and pounding on the poor dog, smelling an unknown scent from it. It tried to fight back, but he was no match to them at this current state. Wild dogs were stronger. After a lot of struggle, the pack of dogs started slowing down. Seeing someone of their own kind, they gradually stopped. The leader came forward. Where did you came from? It barked. You are in my territory. Go away at once, or I will kill you. Rrr. He snapped. A wise old dog realized Shera's miserable condition. So he pleaded with the leader to let Shera stay with them till it gets better. The leader protested at first, but let Shera stay with them, thinking he is weak and cannot be a threat to them. As time passed, Shera started healing and getting stronger. He participated in hunting and other activities with the wild dogs. All the others in the pack worked daily, collecting food, but the leader kept most of the portion to himself. As he was a ferocious black dog, mighty with strength, no one dared to stand against it. Others called him Kalu. Kalu also used to find joy in others' misery and used to bully weak members of the pack. His fear made him the leader. Uh, Shera observed it with time and helped many weak dogs with his own portion of food. He encouraged many dogs to fight against this injustice. Though it took time, many dogs realized how unjust their leader is to them and started following Shera due to his kind and helpful nature. With time, Kalu got more harsh and short tempered towards the weak dogs that were old and sick, unable to fight for themselves. He stopped giving any food to them at all. Many dogs died in this way. Shera felt bad and started protesting against Kalu directly. Kalu barked and warned Shera to stay back, but he stayed in front of Kalu, not budging in an inch to protect the weak members. Watching the courage of Shera, few others joined too. Soon the whole pack started taking a stand against the injustice. This made Kalu nervous and he was helpless in front of the united pack. In the end, he ran away, not able to rule them anymore without fear. Shera taught the dogs the power of unity and became an integral part of the pack. Thank you.
Great. That's a Panchatandra story in the making, isn't it? Others, what do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your immediate thoughts? Don't just say good, great, brilliant. Tell us some observations.
Unique.
I just said don't say good, great, unique. And then you just said unique. Why? What about it is unique? Let me share the screen once again so we can see
The
the
narration
story.
was unique. The story was regular story, but the narration was unique.
Why do you think it's a regular story?
Because in many storybooks, we have heard a similar kind of stories.
What is similar? I just want you to come down to the elements that you find that are similar. Who's the protagonist here?
Shera.
Shera, right? And Shera is a dog. It's a fur dog. Okay. Then who is there an antagonist in this story?
Yes, ma'am.
Who is it?
Is their leader Kalu?
Right. Is there a mentor figure in this story?
Not kind of mentor figure, but the old dog who is just pleaded for Sarah to join the pack.
Right.
That
Ninu, correct?
Ninu. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it is reminiscent of a very famous cartoon and a very famous set of.
Actually, ma'am, it is our thought that we represent not only a dog. Maybe by the representation of dog, maybe we can share a large story of every week and other people who lost their ways in somehow feel a lot of problems and then try to do protest and found their courage and
Right.
yeah.
So here the protagonist is protesting against injustice.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. So think of the earliest story that you can that was written that is about the protagonist taking a stance against injustice. Protagonist fighting for the poor. Then you think of a very important, it's a very, very famous novel also. It's a very famous novel.
Robin Hood.
Right? Absolutely. Right? Robin Hood. What is Robin Hood about, Jayant?
He steals money from the rich people and distributes it among the poor.
Right? Distributes it among the poor. And when was it written?
I don't remember that, man.
You can Google it.
Said, ma'am, just remember that he was a thief, and he stole from this rich persons and then distributed them to the poor. That's the story. I remember. Yes.
Yeah, he was not necessarily your typical goody.
Yeah, not like.
He was a militant.
Yeah, he was a militant. Right? He took a stance against injustice. So that was a similarity that I wanted you to recognize as soon as possible. Great, but great storytelling. Thank you so much. I wanted to point out two more things. Sorry, I forgot. Give me 1 second. It just slipped my mind. Okay, so the naming of the antagonist, Kalu. Is there something peculiar about that?
It was related to his appearance. Like I think he was a ferocious black dog or something. So Kalu is black, yeah.
Now connect it to the history of how antagonists in Indian tales are named. Think about in Indian cartoons.
The Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling. Yes.
Right? So there is this tendency for us to name antagonists in a very particular way, protagonists in a very particular way. That happens in most Indian cartoons. Chota Bheem, what's the antagonist's name in that? Any of you watched Chota Bheem, or are you all too young for
Kalia.
that? Correct? Yes, Kalia, right? And there are so many other stories where the antagonist is represented as this ferocious, dark creature, and the name is also named that way, similarly. Right? So there's something to be unpacked there. I thought that was interesting. You can go back and find out characters in Indian, stories and folk tales that are named something connected to Kalu, Kalya, Kala, whatever. Right? And then you can sort of analyze why that is so, why we are naming these people in this particular way.
Because I think they want to send a message in the society that people with bad instinct or something like that is they want to idealize them to as a bad thing, or something is they want to prove something like in the society. So
A type has been created.
Yes,
correct?
yeah, stereotype, something like.
So I would like you all to go back and Google and do whatever research you can on the archetype. It is again something we do in literature. Archetype. You can, maybe if you are in the mood for reading a little bit more, you can read Archetype by Northrop Frye. Find out what archetypes are, how they are formed. Right? You can go check that out. But essentially, the ferocious dark antagonist in Indian folk tales is an archetype. It has been created over, an iteration of different stories being told. And that's how it has sort of settled into the collective unconscious of Indian society. Okay, great. So those were the thoughts I had regarding the story. Great story, really reminiscent of Panchatantra. And I'm really happy that you took out an animal character as a protagonist.
Thank
The others,
you, ma'am.
just try to move beyond just having young men trying to find a job. That's a good story, but it's done. It's done, overdone. So many people doing the same thing. So you can try for creative ways of, the next time you write a story, you can incorporate maybe a plant. Write it from the point of view of a plant. And even if you're writing a story about, a young man out in the city trying to find a job, write it perhaps from a different perspective. You can try to write it from the second person point of view.
I think we all have created a story from our perspective. We are all young.
Autobiographical writing is the easiest kind of writing, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
It's also
yes.
simultaneously the easiest and the hardest. But yeah, I understand. But in order to sharpen your own story writing skills, try to write it in second person narrative, which is a very challenging thing to do actually. Not many stories are written in second person narrative. You can go check out this person, Juno Diaz, who writes in the second person. It's very, very interesting to read stories like that. And you can also read the story. Not Juno, sorry, I spelled it wrong. Right, you can go look that up, look up his stories. They're written in the second person narrative. What is the second person narrative? What is the second person?
Others is thinking about that about the protagonist or the narrator.
Give me an example of a line that you would see in a second person narrative story.
Like if we are going for Ramayan, for Ram and Ravan, we'll see that Ravan's, when the Ravan is described, when we are telling the thoughts of Ravan or what Ravan is thinking about Ram and the others is happening, maybe this is a second person.
No, a second person is where you write the entire story using you. Right? So the story begins. You have woken up one day and you find yourself on the upper berth of a overnight train. You have reached a little village in the south of Tamil Nadu and you do not know how you got there.
So
That is
something like Fountainhead is.
I am using Fountainhead. I'm sorry.
It could be example of that.
Fountainhead by Ayn Rand.
Yes.
I haven't read it.
Okay. Oh, I read it, so I thought it could be example of it.
Okay, just check if it's because I haven't read it.
That example.
What point of view? No, apparently not. So the Fountainhead is not in your second person narrative. Fountainhead is in third person only because somebody else is saying the story.
Yes, it's a creation of Ayn Rand mind. So.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. Let me check for a quick example of a second person narrative. Juno Diaz's works, of course, some of them are definitely second person. If on a winter's night a travel, that is also a very good example. I think. No, that's not a good example. So you go check out Juno Diaz's works. It's written in the second person. I'll share an article which is written in the second person.
Ma'am, can we consider Sherlock Holmes? Like Watson is telling the story. Can he be second person?
No. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an easy example and then you will understand. That's not correct. The second person narrative, I'm sharing a link with you, right? Okay, you can open that link. Have you opened it? I can hear no response. Have you opened it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So what is it about this that is different from how you've written it?
It's in second person narrative.
Right? So this is what is called a second person narrative. Not just dialogues that use you. The entire narrative is in the second person. Right? Can you see the difference? What happens? What is the effect that such a narrative has?
It feels like we are in the story.
Right? It feels like you, the reader, are taking the story forward. It feels like you are the main character in the story. It is a very, very specific effect. It's not like you are opening the window and looking at something else is happening. Right? It's not like you're opening a window and looking outside and watching the story happen. You are part of the story. You are the main character in the story. Right? And that has a very different effect on the readers. We are the readers. Correct? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So you can maybe when you write your stories, you can try to experiment with the different persons. You can write in first person, of course, that's quite easy. Third person is again the most commonly done sort of writing, but second person is not very often done. So you can
Yes,
try to do that.
ma'am. Actually, in writing a story, asks a lot of time and effort. And I've taken 4 subjects, so it is very difficult to get 1 hour time. Is very difficult to get 1 hour. We do just 3 things: sleep, eat, and study. Just do this. But
Take an hour out during the weekends. It's okay.
there is a assignment deadline all the way.
This you can consider as a leisure activity. It's quite great. It takes effort, but it's also like pleasurable at the end of the day. So yeah, so that's it. Really, really nice listening to all of your stories. I hope you understood a few things. We talked about a few terms today. We talked about what free indirect discourse is. What is free indirect discourse? Anushri.
It's a literary technique when we shift the point of view mid-story to emphasize something.
Not just any point of view. When a third person narrative point of view shifts to the first person
narrative, yeah.
Then it's called free indirect discourse. Now, most of Jane Austen's novels, you know who Jane Austen is? Anyone knows who Jane Austen
Yes,
is?
Yes.
Yes. She's written a very famous novel.
Which novel? She's written many famous novels.
Pride and Prejudice.
Yes, Pride and Prejudice.
Absolutely.
And there is a movie of that also, which is very famous movie also.
There is a movie. Most recently, another adaptation has come out of her novel Persuasion on Netflix. You might know that.
Yes.
So Persuasion is a novel that is written using free indirect discourse. What I talked about. It's a very, very tactfully written in free indirect discourse. So that's a literary technique that we talked about. And what about the Bildungsroman? What did you learn about the Bildungsroman? What is the Bildungsroman?
It is a shifting of stage from one stage to another stage. I mean, when someone is moving, young person is moving from their one stage to another stage.
Great, perfect. What else did we learn? We talked about archetype. What is an archetype?
It's like a stereotype.
A stereotype, but not necessarily untrue. And it's something that has been built over time as a part of literary trends in a particular culture or language. Right? You will have the figure of the widowed mother. In most Hindi movies, for instance, you will have the figure of the old widowed mother who wears a white sari. Recognize the trope? Do you recognize the trope?
Yes.
So that is what you would call an archetype. Right? It's something that has been built up over time. And you can immediately sort of think of a figure.
A specific type of character.
Right? So you can read up more on that. There's a lot written on the archetype. So you can read up more if you want to. And yeah, what is second person narrative?
Ma'am, when reader is involved in a story.
Right?
When narrator itself involved in the story. So I think.
Right. So when the story is written using the second person you, and it feels as if the reader, us, we are taking the story forward. We are not just reading the story, we are part of the story.
Ma'am, like someone is narrating something in front of him itself?
Yeah, to you. Narrating your story to you.
Narrating our story to us.
Yeah, so it would something. So Sneha, you sent. Sneha, you were probably doing something else 2 years ago. Then then you applied for the BSc degree program, then you've worked hard, then you've come for the storytelling workshop and you've written a story. I'm talking to you about you. So the story is about you, and I'm using the pronoun you, right? So everything about it is the second person narrative.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Ma'am,
great.
can you tell us about the effect you are talking about, that what effect this is giving to the story? Like, I'm not getting this.
The second person narrative, what effect it has?
Yes, ma'am.
Others,
Like,
has anybody understood that? Would be able to explain it?
Ma'am has given a link regarding that small story. You just open it, you will get an idea.
Karthik, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk
Ma'am,
about
Excuse me, ma'am.
ma'am, the story feels like as if we have done this incident. We were involved in the story.
right? It
It's
feels
all about
as
us.
if we, the readers, are ourselves taking the story forward. It feels as if we are part of the story. We are not just, it's not just like opening a window and looking at a event happening or reading something that is happening to somebody else, but feeling as if the incident or the process or life is happening to ourselves and we are just the readers. Right?
okay. Yes.
You can go through the link that I've sent. It is a very good example of a second person narrative. You can read the works of Junot Diaz. He also writes in second person narrative, and it'll be really good. You'll have a very good idea of how exactly that feels. How the effect is very, very different from a third person narrative or a first person narrative.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
Ma'am,
Okay. So I think we're well over time. Yes, Ankit.
ma'am, how to improve narration so that when you speak, you don't sound very dry?
Practice in front of a mirror. Listen to other people speak. Do it consistently over time and you will get better. There is no shortcut to this.
Okay, ma'am.
Listen to other people doing it, practice in front of the mirror, and practice over time, consistently, and you'll get better. Yes, Karthik, please, you can go ahead. We are well over time. Very sorry about that. And actually, I'll wind up the session right now.
Yes,
We'll
thank you,
meet
ma'am.
tomorrow for a little bit of a session on fables, parables, and a little bit of public speaking.
Yes, sure, ma'am.
Great. Great.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
See
you,
you
ma'am.
all. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Wonderful talking to you today. And nice session.
Thank you, ma'am.